Good afternoon, everyone, in person and online. So on behalf of the European Food Forum, I'm very happy to welcome you today. I'll be your moderator, and I look forward for a vital and dynamic discussion regarding the sustainability of food system. Before going any further, I would like to make a clarification. I am employed by Yara International, but I will moderate as a transparent moderator and in the capacity of an informed consumer more than anything else. And in line with the Food Forum spirit, I would say really the goal here is to have an unbiased discussion and also to basically follow how the European Food Forum works as a non-partisan and politically led forum. Also, today, such as any other European food event, we are here to promote a multi-stakeholder dialogue, and I look very much forward to the conversation. We find ourselves at a critical juncture, and the direction of travel is clear. We want to reach net zero by 2050, but it's a monumental undertaking if we look at the food system, considering the share of greenhouse gas emissions coming from the agri-food chain. So I look forward to this conversation. We have a lot of distinguished speakers, and I would like particularly to salute you, Mr. Butcher, for being with us this afternoon, for this amazing opportunity to have such a dialogue. And finally, a short thanks. Really, I would like to thank the three MEPs who are hosting us today, Mrs. Solre, Mr. Fiocchi, and Mr. Kokalis. Gisela, you want to add something at this stage? Otherwise, I will invite Mr. Fiocchi for some introductory remarks.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. I'm sorry I'm not there with you, but I'm in Rome. And by the way, I'm at the Ministry of Agriculture just to talk about the same topic that you are working on in this event. It is a very important topic because obviously with 8 billion people on this planet, we need to assure that we have a very good, sustainable agricultural production. There are some very technical questions to handle, of course, like the use of artificial intelligence for reducing the use of water and the use of pesticides and the use of fertilizers and everything else. But not only that, also we have the discussion regarding the new breeding techniques to create vegetables and food production which are not needing too many pesticides and other, dangerous chemicals to feed the world population. So, from this point of view, again, I'm sorry I'm not there with you, but I'm with you in the fight, and I think we can do an excellent job to bring home a sustainable solution for the planet need. Thank you very much, and a big kiss to everybody and a big hug. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fiocchi. Good luck for your endeavors. I also would like to add that we have some journalists who are connecting online and that the discussion will be recorded.
Fantastic.
Okay, good. Then we can directly jump into the discussion and go into the first panel. So the first panel will give an overview, basically, of how climate-neutral products in the sustainable food systems can play a role, looking at both the, I would say, decarbonization side and how to move away from fossil fuels. What is the appetite of consumers for sustainable food products? And also, we will have a look at the broader global picture from an FAO perspective with Federica. And first, I will give the word to Sofia, who is in front of me. Please, Sofia, the floor is yours, and be mindful of your time. You have 7 minutes.
Yeah, you might want to remind me of that, maybe. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And since I'm the first speaker, and since we will hear about concrete examples of climate-neutral solutions in the agri-food value chain later from the second panel, I thought I'd take a a broader approach to this session, which includes looking at the climate neutrality for the whole economy and the role of the agri-food sector in that. I think we all agree that sustainability in agri-food system depends on all actors along the value chain, from the input sectors over farmers, processors, retailers to the end consumers. But decarbonizing food production is also very closely linked to other sectors of the economy. Obviously, the energy sector, transportation, chemicals and materials as well, if you think, for example, about more sustainable food packaging. So let's talk about decarbonization. Decarbonization means primarily the reduction of CO2 emissions. But our climate targets are not only about that. Our climate targets are not only about reduced emissions into the atmosphere, they are also about a shift of the feedstock of our economy, away from the fossil-based feedstock to a bio-based feedstock. And this is where the climate neutrality target for the whole economy, for the whole EU economy, has a real impact on, or can have a real impact on the agri-food system. The link is the biomass. And this is why I think it's important to talk about the use and management of biomass when we talk about the decarbonization of the agri-food sector. And actually, I forgot that we have slides, so that would have been the first slide. I'm so sorry. So there you can see all of that. And now we can go to the second slide. So let's talk about the demand for biomass. Of course, the demand for biomass is driven by food production and feed production, but increasingly also due to our to this shift that I just explained, the increase for demand will come from the energy sector, from materials and fibers industries, for example, also for textiles and packaging, also in building and construction. There will be a demand for more biomass and bio-based products, and in the chemical sectors as well. And then the third element here in green is that we also have our biodiversity restoration, protection, ecosystem conservation targets, which also require to set aside or at least protect some part of our available biomass. The predictions for the level of demand differ greatly, I would say, for 2030, 2050, but nevertheless, we can say that we will see an increase. Next slide, please. If we look at where does the biomass come from, we see here, this is the little green box, or not the little green box, the green box at the bottom. And it's the source is the Joint Research Center with data from 2017. But the data in itself is not that relevant. We see that the majority comes from agricultural production. And then we have a surplus of demand already today, which is covered by some reuse of waste, so bio-waste and byproducts. And also here, the predictions for the availability of biomass supply in the future differ greatly, but in general, we can say we can expect an increase in the gap between supply of biomass and demand of biomass. And so what is the role? Next slide, please. What is the role of the agri-food sector and all of that? Of course, the agri-food sector will benefit in its quest for more sustainability from bio-based solutions when we talk about transportation, energy, and so on, green energy, for example. But on the other hand, as just seen, the agri-food sector is also the supplier of the biomass. So it's at the beginning of a sustainable biomass supply. And I've given here an example for which is based on the reuse, repurposing of food waste. And an example where a biorefinery would source from all steps along the food value chain, source the food waste from there and process it into very different products. So, of course, food and feed ingredients, but also biopolymers, biofuels, biochemicals, and etc. And there we see that bioeconomy and circularity are inextricably linked. And we will see if this whole bioeconomy moves forward, we will see an integration, but more integration of the different economic sectors, food, energy, material sectors, and of the waste streams and of product streams and so on. It also means an integration and stronger network of the actors. And we will probably see the more focus on local bioeconomic solutions, which are also mentioned in the EU biodiversity strategy. So the bioeconomy is not there yet. There's still a whole lot of research investment to be done. And also the policy framework, there's still some hurdles, but this should not be the purpose of today. Today, I want to look into, more at what are the important questions for the agri-food systems. And I mentioned in the beginning, it's about the biomass. So of course, we need a good, solid framework for the repurposing of food waste, giving it a value, making it into a product, bringing it back into the value chain. So this is the regulatory side here. But we've also seen in the slide on the supply of biomass that the majority is supplied from agriculture and forestry. So this supply is and will continue to be limited. It will be limited by the available land here in the EU. It will be limited by the quality of soils, and it will be limited by the changing climate conditions. And this is why, not surprising, we can go to the next slide. Okay, I make it. This is why, of course, the basis for all of this, not only the sustainable agri-food system, but a sustainable economy, is a sustainable and resilient agricultural production. There should be the interest, and I think we agree on that, but the interest of all actors involved in the agri-food industry, but also in the bio-based industries. But the second point, the more interesting here, I think, is the need for a biomass management. We need to set up a management system for biomass, a governance framework for biomass. And here it has been proposed to apply a cascading principle, which means that biomass will primarily be used for high-value applications, which would include food, but also chemicals and materials, and only in a second step go, for example, into energy production. But then my question would be, should we nevertheless prioritize food production somehow? Should we somehow bring that into our policy framework? I mean, we've discussed food security a lot in the past years. Then also there's the issue of the market and the prices. If we have new actors in the system, how will the prices change? It's a great opportunity for the diversification of farmers' incomes, but nevertheless, how does this link to the prioritization for food production? And then the last point, I put it as the last one because it's a very controversial point, is we need to reconsider the role of livestock in the future of agri-food systems. Livestock is, of course, also a source of biomass, but we know it's also very resource intensive and also polluting. Currently, 6% of agricultural biomass go into the feeding and bedding of livestock. And the question is, shouldn't we free up the land by reducing livestock? We can also discuss the public health impact. Problem is, of course, shift in dietary changes are not that easy. Is this really what we will achieve a consensus on? We have cultural considerations that go into it. And I know this question is very, very controversial, but I think we need to discuss it because it comes up in very different areas when we talk about public health, but also about the management of biomass here, as we see, which is essential, as I tried to explain. And this is just a critical question, but let's discuss it. So finally, concluding remarks, I wanted to show that, yes, decarbonization, defossilization is an essential element of making the EU food system sustainable. But the other side of the coin is that agricultural and food sectors are also the essential element for defossilization of the whole economy. And the core challenge is the sustainable management and governance of biomass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Are there any questions in the room or online? After? Okay, then we'll take the second presentation and I will invite Eric, who is online, to present the results of a study done by Ipsos on the appetite of consumers for green products. Eric, the floor is yours. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. I hope that you now see my presentation. If not, just let me know. Excellent. So, I'm no technical expert in the field. I'm the country manager of Ipsos in Norway, so the global market research agency. I'm here to talk about a study that we conducted for Yara that, among other things, produce green fertilizers. So Yara wanted to understand Europeans' attitudes towards reduction of carbon in food production. And to do that, we asked a nationally representative sample in select European countries, a battery of questions regarding sustainable food production. So we couldn't survey the whole of the EU, all European markets, but we chose markets so that we get a fairly balanced point of view in terms of the European point of view. So we have markets in the north, in the south, in the east, and in the west. Let me just point out that the study it isn't old, but it was conducted last year, so 11-12 months ago. Sustainability and the narrative when it comes to sustainability, it's of course moving along. But based on other research, we have no reason to believe that things would be radically different if we were to run this study at this moment in time. On the next couple of slides, there's quite a lot of data and numbers. So let me just call out a couple of key insights that you will see in the slides to follow. First of all, I think there is a general agreement in the among the European consumer population that food producers should reduce carbon emissions. This is not controversial, and it's a rather high consensus across the different European markets. Close to everyone also agrees that producers should be incentivized to do so, and a majority would welcome stricter regulations. A majority in all markets also like the idea of having a carbon footprint label on the products so that it's easier as a consumer to really understand the carbon footprint of different food items. So this is kind of dimensions of the sustainability the debate that most markets agree upon. Then we see some more variation across the markets in terms of sort of the involvement and the role of the consumer as such. And we see a divide between, or broad divide between southeastern markets and northwestern markets. So the consumers in southeastern markets are more likely to support producers that cut emissions, so actively support them. They already consider sustainability as important when they make consumer choices. And they are also more willing to pay a premium for fossil-free food items. So this you will see in the slides that follows. And let me just add a caveat here. This doesn't necessarily mean that consumers in the northwestern markets are less focused on sustainability, but rather that they see this as the responsibility of regulators and the food producers themselves. And they do not, to the same extent, see the role of the consumers in this ecosystem. So looking at the numbers, I should point out that this is not in the order of the actual questions in the survey, but rather sorted from kind of where we see the highest consensus across the different markets towards the questions where we see the least consensus. So as I said, there seems to be a broad consensus in the European markets that food producers should work to reduce their emissions from food production. There is also a broad consensus, even though we see some variations, we see a relatively broad consensus in terms of incentivizing. So people think that food farmers and food producers should be incentivized to reduce their carbon footprint. When it comes to regulations, we see that we're starting to see some larger differences between the different markets, but still there's a majority in our markets that support stricter legislations when it comes to greenhouse gases from food production. As I said, people in all markets are support having a carbon footprint label on food items so that it's easier for them to make smart, sustainable choices. Where we see larger differences is when we actually ask about the role of the consumers. So here we see a relative big difference between Turkey, Spain, Poland on the one hand, and Germany, Denmark, and Norway, for instance. This is where we ask about their active support as consumers for producers that actually cut emissions. So in the northeastern markets, we tend to see that they wouldn't be open to actually compromise on quality. So they would make sustainable choices if the quality is as high as it is with less kind of sustainable options. So we see that in terms of quality. We see it also, this divide in terms of the importance that people already put on sustainability when they make their consumer choices. So we see it's a quite large difference between Poland on the one end of the spectrum and Norway on the other. We see that when we point out that the carbon footprint of the industry is very high, people in the northwestern markets, some of them, or actually a majority in Germany, for instance, they say that this will not impact their choice in terms of their consumer decisions. And again, people in the southeastern markets, so Turkey, Italy, Poland, for instance, they are much more willing to pay a premium for sustainable products than what we see in the northwestern markets. And on the same topic, we see that population in the southeastern markets, they are more open to making choices so that they choose fossil-free food items or low-carbon items, whereas the population in the northwestern markets, they are a bit more skeptical. So they say that, okay, they would, for instance, in Norway, there's a majority of people saying that they would choose the cheapest option, even if it's the least climate-friendly one. In all markets, people agree that it's not very easy to make sustainable choices, and so they welcome labeling, as I mentioned earlier, to make it easier to actually make sustainable choices. With that, I think I have used up my 7 minutes. I hope it gave you a sense of the public opinion among Europeans in terms of sustainable food production. And yeah, it's perfectly possible to reach out to either me or Ola, which is also on the line, if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erika. Thank you. It was a good reality check, I would say, between intentions and willingness on the ground of the consumer sides. Before we go into the panel discussion, I would like to Federica, who is online. Okay, but she might join in a couple of minutes. I understand Mrs. Tolrey has also joined and she would like to jump in here. So Irene, please, the floor is yours. Okay, we go with Federica. Sorry, we're still adjusting with some colleagues being online. So Federica, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me share. Okay, thank you very much for this invitation. Today I would like to share with you the objectives of the FAO strategy on climate change and its action plan. Next. All of us, we know the climate change already has several impacts on agri-food systems. For example, high temperatures, variation of precipitation levels, droughts and floods that are impacting on different level in agri-food productions. Next. But in particular, these effects are most on the vulnerable livelihood, and especially in Africa, in South Asia, in Central America, and in small island developing states. Next. Why FAO decided to have this strategy on climate change? First of all, because many years ago, FAO and climate change actions was related only on agriculture production. But after many, let me say, many debates and dialogues and many inputs by farmers, governments, FAO decided to move his agenda to transform agri-food systems. And we adjusted, let me say, the agenda, our objectives to the Agenda 2030 and its sustainable development goals. These our research, our work now is taking into account the latest scientific evidence on climate change and how it affects agri-food systems. Next. So the FAO climate change strategies is concentrated at 3 levels. The first one is a global level, regional levels to strengthen climate policy and governance. And in the next slides, I will share with you some projects, results of some projects to support this action. The second level is the country level, where FAO is developing country capacity for climate action, and the local level, where FAO is scaling up action with local communities and vulnerable groups. Next. So these strategies is guiding by principles that are related to science and innovation. So research is one component, is a very important component in these strategies. Inclusiveness. So we are trying to involve all stakeholders in the strategy. In our project is absolutely important to take in consideration vulnerable groups like gender, youth, and indigenous peoples. Partnership is another principle that is important, because all stakeholders need to be involved, but more important is to make partnerships between different stakeholders who have different needs, different criteria, different context-specific problematics, and so on. this is related to an holistic approach who is based on participatory approaches where all stakeholders need to be at the same table to discuss, to debate about how to transform agri-food systems, and also because the context specificity is another element that has to be taken in consideration, especially if we would like to have not only transform agri-food system, but also to make more funds available. And this is the last principle important, is the access to finance to allow governments, but also other stakeholders to be part of this process. Next. So the action plan developed from June 2022, right after the endorsement of the strategy, and in close collaboration with FAO staff and FAO members through written contributions, but also workshops and so on. Was finalized in June 2023 and published in 6 UN languages over the summer. This was the action plan aims to ensure the successful implementation of the strategy and the enhancement of FAO climate action. Is also guaranteed the monitoring in alignment with the implementation of the strategic framework at the FAO. And every 2 years, there is a report in alignment with a FAO reporting cycle, and was updated following a mid-term review of the strategy in 2025. OCB, the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment, has started the analysis and implementation of the strategy in parallel to its analysis of the progress made in implementation on climate action. The conclusion will be presented as a part of the program implementation report at the next program committee in March 2024. Next. So what are the operational modalities? First of all, FAO, the first step is to increase the capacity development. This means to support governments and other stakeholders to increase their capacities to transform agri-food systems. FAO is making also strong analysis and strong actions on resource mobilization. Partnership is another point absolutely important, as I already mentioned. And communication is the knowledge sharing activity that is an operational modality to not only sharing what FAO is doing, but also a campaign on communication on how to transform agri-food systems is another step to share knowledge, research data, and collect input from different stakeholders. Next. So the FAO is already taking action at each level. Next, please. At the level of global and regional level, we participated the COP, where the Coronivia joint work and the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work was led by FAO. Last year, we launched also the FAST project. It's a multi-stakeholder partnership to aim to accelerate the transformation of agri-food system by 2030 for climate, people, and nature. The objective are to access to finance. So the next step is to make projects on allow access to finance, share knowledge, and increase the capacity in different stakeholders, and giving support to at the policy level to governments and make dialogue between different stakeholders. At the country level, at the country level, FAO is elaborating and implementing the NDCs and NAPs through different projects. One is Scala. This project supports implementation of NDCs with different in different countries. In particular, at the moment we are concentrated on Haiti and Senegal. In the
Federica?
Yeah?
I'm sorry, but we've reached 7 minutes.
Sorry, I'm
time,
finished.
so
I'm
we'd
finishing.
be grateful if you can
Yes,
wrap it.
next slide. At the local level, we are also adopting a good practices using farm-field schools and involving gender, youth, indigenous peoples. Next step. Next. Thank you. Next. Because there is a wrap up of all these theory of change. So the idea is to underlining causes, underlining causes and consequences for climate change, going to support, improve capacity, strategic partnership, new policies and access and scaling up climate finance through the three pillars at the global, country level, and local level to transform agri-food system. The impact is for FAO members and agri-food system stakeholders to accelerate the transformation of agri-food system to a more sustainable, inclusive, resilient, and adaptive agri-food system in the context of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federica. I think the theory of change is something we can build on for the conversation. Now we'd like to give the floor to Mrs. Torre, who joins us online. Good afternoon, Irene. The floor is yours.
Hello, very good to be with you. Hello from Paris. I'm very happy and I've listened already to what was said. It is the core of what we want to do with the European Food Forum. It's to understand the how. So we know where we want to go, but then after we need to discuss how we reach the objectives and the role of climate neutral components to produce sustainable food system is very, very important. I was at the FAO last Monday and Tuesday in Rome, and so there are planet issues, and we need to Europe need to stand and by its role and of having a very sustainable agriculture that feeds more than Europe and all the people that are undernourished. So I'm very happy that we have this discussion together, and I wish you to go on very, very well, and I will keep on listening from Paris.
Thank you, Irene. Good luck for this. So thank you to the three speakers. I think we have now a perspective of how we can use biomass and maybe some of the aspects we need to agree on in order to have the best possible use of biomass, but also a clear understanding of how this plays into the more global context and how consumers perceive it. So now if I go back to you, Federica, because here we are at the European Food Forum, we are a multi-stakeholder panel and group. So to implement its strategy, what is the FAO actually expecting from private players?
Thank you. Private sector is an important partner in this strategy. The idea is to improve what the partnership with the private sector is to improve understanding of development issues. With the view to improving the design of solutions, for example, take into account the associated trade-offs, and also promote economic and social inclusion. What we expected from this collaboration is to promote economic and social inclusion and facilitate inclusion in value chain, and also to make more access for profitable markets. Also, absolutely important is the technologies that the private sector can and the research that the partnership with the private sector can increase these element, this research on technologies, and to scaling up innovation at all levels. For governments, but also for farmers, and to mobilize also scientific and evidence-based expertise. We know that the private sector has an amazing expertise in at the scientific level, and these can help on, especially for vulnerable people, farmers, small groups, can be a player to do a catalytic role in changing the way in which business, in which way the business can be operated. If I can make an example, in one of the last projects in Ecuador, we increased the capacities of indigenous peoples in business, making a partnership with an international private sector in cacao. So these help farmers on increasing their capacities at the business level.
Thank you, Federica. I also would like to invite Sophia and then Eric to jump in here. Please be concise in your answers because the clock is ticking. Sophia, you touched upon the competition for biomass use in a way, but you look mainly in your talk at the European dimension, but we are not in a bubble. We live in an open world. So what is the external dimension of that aspect, and also relating to the whole conversation around strategic autonomy at the moment?
I think, well, without the external dimension, without considering the external dimension, we will not be able to make our system sustainable. We all know the scenarios that have been published more or less in 2021 around the farm to fork strategy, which some of them predicted increases in imports, and there were flaws in these scenarios. But nevertheless, I think all scenarios of a future sustainable food system that I know include a shift of diets, of dietary habits. So I think what we need to consider in all of that is that without a shift in diets, it will not be possible, probably. This is a difficult discussion also to have. And then, of course, we actually what Federica touched just upon is that our trade relations are very crucial and our not only trade relations, but also all forms of relations with other countries are very crucial in ensuring that the imports are sustainable. And I'm not going into the details of mirror measures and FTAs now. We are publishing soon a paper on it. Stay tuned.
Good, you raised our expectations. Eric, in the questions you've been asking, did you ask actually a question about the willingness to shift or change the dietary habits? And if not, How are you also looking at the discrepancy sometimes between the intention of the consumers as responded in the questions and their behaviors in the supermarket?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, no, we didn't now ask about the dietary or changes to their dietary habits. We haven't asked that question actually. So we only focused on the actual choices that you make in the supermarket, for instance. In terms of your second question, yes, there is always a discrepancy between what people say and the kind of attitudes that they have and their choices in the supermarket. So these kind of studies will always capture the attitudes. But they give an indication in terms of their perception and their willingness to do something. But you can't interpret the numbers directly. So 60% saying that they will do something, for instance, there's never 60% to actually go out and do that. But you can interpret the patterns, and you can see, you can get a clear view of the indication of how important different attitudes and consumer choices or drivers of consumer choices actually is.
Yeah, I think it also gives clarity also for private sector to know which way to go. Before we move to the second panel, I would like to ask you, Mr. Butcher, if you would like to ask a question to one of the panelists or have a statement. No?
Thank you. I will do it at the end.
You do it at the end?
Yes.
That's perfect. Thank you. You help with the time management.
Thank you.
Then I thank you, Sophia, Federica, and Eirik for this first round, and we'll move into the second round and the second panel for today. So now we'll move basically from having set the scene on what our consumers expecting, and also how we can contribute to the global dimension as to the concrete how, as Irene, you pointed out earlier. What are the concrete solutions? How can research and innovation help to contribute to a more sustainable food supply chain, to climate neutral products, and also respond to consumer needs? And with that, we'll start with the very beginning of the food chain and plant nutrition. So Nicolas, please, the floor is yours. 7 minutes, I repeat.
Thank you very much. I think I have some slides as well. But okay, so I'm Nicolas, I'm working for ICL, a fertilizer manufacturer. And I will give you here a short presentation about a concrete example of circular economy and how we can turn waste into efficient product that we can use to farm and fertilize fields. Next slide, please. Okay, so those are the questions I will try to answer. So in the presentation, you will tell me then if I did answer those questions. But why is phosphorus relevant? Where does it come from? How could we produce it? How else could we produce it? And why is this relevant for European Union? Next slide, please. So first, a bit of background for the one that are not familiar with fertilization and plant nutrition. So phosphorus is one of the three major elements with nitrogen and potassium that are necessary for plant nutrition. But in general, they are among, let's say, scientists do not exactly agree about, but about 15 nutrients that are necessary. And phosphate, you cannot make it. You need to produce it. There is no substitute, and it's used in the DNA. So you have phosphate in DNA and in every energy exchange and processes you have in plants, but also in human, for your information. We all have a lot of phosphorus in our bodies. Next slide, please. So today, the current situation in European Union, so that's a global picture of the consumption of phosphate fertilizer, mineral phosphate fertilizer, I should say, because you also have manure, of course, from farmers that are in their well recycling. So there is about 1.2 million tons of phosphate fertilizer that are applied in Europe today. And most of this is imported from countries out of Europe. There's a small production in Europe, but it cannot supply all Europe. So it's coming from many different countries, but among those, North Africa, Morocco, country which is known as with the biggest reserve of phosphate. and other North African countries like Egypt, Algeria, Jordani, and Israel, for instance, and Russia. To not forget about that one. And for your information, phosphate and phosphorus is currently on the list of critical raw material. So that's something that Europe is already monitoring. Next slide, please. So today, the example we want to give, but that's just one example, and probably not the first, but one of the first example. And I hope there will be a lot of other examples which follow in the coming years. Sewage sludge. So sewage sludge is something that we produce everywhere in Europe. It's coming from the water treatment, the wastewater. And so I'll give you a bit of statistic there, but it's a complicated one to gather. There is about 7.5 million tons of sewage sludge that was produced in Europe in 2020. So that gives you the picture. And then in the next slide, we'll see how it's used. So next slide, please. So there are different ways to use this sludge. You can apply it in agriculture. So that's 1/3 of it is currently applied directly in the field. But of course, it comes with a lot of question and challenge related to the contamination of these sewage sludge when it's not treated, especially in the wastewater treatment facilities. So 12% is currently go to landfill, 12 is used in compost and transform, and 10 is used in other ways. And in 22, so last year, we knew that 31% was incinerated into sewage sludge ash. And actually, this will probably increase in the coming years as some countries decided that they want to incinerate everything. They don't want to have sewage sludge applied anymore like that in the field, or they don't want to have sewage sludge stocked or stored in landfill. So this is something that will probably increase in the coming years. And if we calculate, in theory, of course, what could provide sewage sludge ash in terms of phosphate, it's about 6% of the fertilizer demand. So this is a study that has been done by the Environmental Agency, to be clear. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next. So I will continue while the slide is coming. So here the example, it's quite a simple one actually. So phosphorus is concentrated in sewage sludge, ash by the water treatment and incineration facilities, but the phosphate in there is not available for plants. Plants cannot use it as it is. So you need to transform it. So we developed within ICL a process that can make this phosphate available for plants. And we produce fertilizer that can be easily used by farmers. Actually, we finalized the production processes and industrial scale-up last year, so it's quite new. Next slide, please. I need to go fast now. So some picture just to show you how it concretely works. So we receive, actually these factories is, the first one is based in Amsterdam, in Netherlands. So we receive the ashes from the facilities directly stored in silos. And then we have a process that transforms that into granular fertilizer, a product that farmer cannot differentiate by the look from any other fertilizer that they would use. And next slide, please. I think that's the last one. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so how can EU benefit from circular phosphate? So first of all, of course, turning waste into a product with a value for agronomy, for economic value within EU it's very positive because it's a waste that costs to every citizen, and we turn that into something that has a value. And then if you continue showing the slides, it shows that we reduce our dependency to external imports. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are heavily depending on imports from other countries. And the last one is, of course, as EU, it's always good to show leadership in environmental technologies, such as the one I just presented. And last slide, and I finished. So recycling nutrients, so it's a journey. It's an exciting journey, but I have to say that it's a challenging journey. We have been working for years to develop this first product. We are currently working, we are not the only one, of course, but we are working on many different technologies, talking with many different waste producers, let's say, and also on research to develop technology that are able to recycle those waste. It's not easy because every different waste will require or do require a different process usually. So that's a challenge. So if I sum up, those challenges, there are R&D challenges that are necessary. It's necessary to develop those processes, as I said. Industrial scale-up, we faced ourselves with this challenge last year. We finalized it, so now we are ready and we already sell the product on the market. Of course, regulatory. I don't have to tell you that regulation can be tough sometimes. And waste regulation is a case which is even tougher because most of the waste regulation across Europe are not harmonized yet. And that makes things more complicated. And of course, the last one, which is adoption by farmer, adjusting farming system in general for farmers sensitive. And when we come with such an innovation, explaining where it comes from, meaning waste, you need some time to convince farmer. And of course, there is a cost, and supporting this new product would be probably beneficial to everyone to kickstart this initiative and to make farmers used to apply those products and realize that they are as good as the others or even better sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. So now we move from the very beginning of the food chain to the processing and to Caroline. So please, the floor is yours. Chan, apologies for that. So we go to Chan first, apologies.
I think it wouldn't really matter, but thank you. First, a thank you to Luisella and to the European Food Forum for organizing and our hosting MEPs for this session. A brief introduction to Mondelez International. For those who are not familiar with the corporate name, I'm sure you would know our brand names like Côte d'Or here in Belgium, who is the nation's chocolate, or Milka or Cadbury Dairy Milk in the UK. In the biscuits category, you would know probably Oreo and Blue Biscuits. And you may also know our Philadelphia cream cheese. So we are the manufacturer of these brands. So a house of brands in that sense as Mondelez International, a leading snack foods company. Sustainability and carbon emission goals. I think it's high on most international companies' agenda. For us at Mondelez International, sustainability is one of our 4 key pillars that we are working on, especially from a growth perspective. So the undertaking is to be able to create sustainable products in a sustainable environment. For the past few years, we've been on a path to reduce our carbon emissions. So lots of initiatives undertaken in that regard. We do have obviously a goal of having net zero by 2050. As part of that goal, we are not working alone. We have signed the Science Based Targets Initiative, so SBTI, and with a business ambition for 1.5 degrees of climate change. So I think aligning our long-term climate targets with the aim of limiting temperature rise is also in line with the Paris Agreement, which we attach enormous importance because this is where the international community comes together around a number of joint measures and joint initiatives. We have, in the meanwhile, reduced since 2018 our carbon footprint. Our CO2 emissions in our manufacturing sites have reduced by 25% already. If you take 2018 as a basis in 2022, 39% of our electricity used in our manufacturing plants are already renewable, again, by 2022 numbers. So hopefully 2023 will be even higher on those. And 96% of our packaging is designed for recyclability. So in that journey, which we believe is a process, we think there are a number of principles for that transition. So the first of them is transform the way we do business. So there is a lot upon the companies and the industry itself. The second is build our existing efforts by scaling proven models to have a wider impact. The third is to collaborate across the industry. I think these forums are especially important for that. The fourth one is investing in bold innovation to drive technological evolution, and we're doing this, and I'll provide a few examples in that regard. And finally, we have to be transparent in progress, setting interim targets, and communicating regular updates. So as such, for instance, one interim target for us is by 2025, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 25% already. Now, as I am not an expert on that matter, if you had asked me a couple of years back, so what's Mondelez's biggest carbon footprint? I would probably think about our manufacturing, because we have large ovens. I could probably think about logistics, because we are an international company operating across all the markets in the world. But I found out that this is not the case. To the contrary, our biggest carbon footprint comes from the raw materials that we're using. 2/3, right, of the entire carbon footprint. Just to give you an example, our manufacturing is only 7% compared to close to 70% that comes from our raw materials. So as our products and brands are the interface between the company's sustainability initiatives and our consumers, obviously, right, this is key for us to channel these through our brands and our initiatives in that sense. And this comes to the appetite and the willingness discussion as well that we had with Ipsos, right? The intent and the purchase may not always go hand in hand, yet at the same time, this gives us a direction. So this is how we're preparing. And also, as a leading company, I think we should not only follow the trends, but also be a trendsetter and lead. So with that, I would give you some concrete examples on the three commodities that we have, and cocoa. So one of the largest chocolate manufacturers in the world, cocoa stands for about 1/5 of our carbon emissions. So what do? We have already invested since 2022 through our Signature Cocoa Life program around 400 million to be able to build farmer awareness and farmer education and farmer capabilities. We are adding another 600 million to this to bring it to $1 billion worth investment. And deforestation in the cocoa is one of the key challenges for the industry, cross-sectoral. And we have found out that indeed cocoa trees are shade trees. So they like to be grown up in shades in the biodiversity. So therefore, one of the key education that we are providing to the farmers that we are working with is how do they develop shade trees, shading farming in the cocoa field. And already in the past 10 years, we know that the initiatives that we have undertaken have helped us reduce deforestation in the countries that we're working with, in Ghana and in Côte d'Ivoire. So that's on cocoa. On wheat, which is again another key raw material for our biscuits and baked snacks category, we have a Harmony Wheat program, which is very much focused on developing biodiversity with the farmers that we're working. This initiative had started 15 years ago with a handful of farmers. Today, we are reaching 1,300 farmers with that initiative. Regenerative agriculture and pollination being the key aspects that we are focused on. And hence, an aim to reduce greenhouse emissions at the source through our farmers, with our farmers, in holding hands with them and developing those practices. And finally, on dairy, right, again, another 1/5 of our carbon emissions comes from dairy, not only for our Philadelphia, but you would understand that we use lots of milk and milk derivatives in our chocolate products as well. So we do have a target to reduce them by 10% by 2025. So we work very closely with the suppliers to encourage them in measuring CO2 at the source. And today, around 90% of our suppliers are measuring in key geographies the CO2 emissions at the source, which is an important awareness building activity also with those farmers. And to give you some concrete examples, in that sense, 85% of dairy farmers who supply milk in the Alpine region have completed their baseline and are also in year 2 of their reduction program. So today they have already achieved more than 5% reductions through those programs. We are also testing new techniques with partners in Poland, Germany, and Spain to reduce CO2 in dairy. So as a matter of fact, including our Harmony Wheat program as well, we work across all European geographies, as Europe is our biggest, manufacturing footprint, as well as for our products. So in conclusion, maybe, if I may, we see a real need for driving sustainability in food systems. Climate-sensitive farming is a key driver for that. Europe is well placed to lead these efforts and inspire others around the world. Now, as Mondelez, therefore, we are very much supporting all these sustainable food system initiatives that Europe is undertaking. I do believe that this best can be achieved by collective efforts, on the other hand, and especially ensuring that all stakeholders have a say in this positive agenda. Now, we should be looking at this in a systemic and holistic way. This is not something that can be addressed only by farmers, by the industry, or by regulators alone. They should work hand in hand. And I think we should also be able to create the right enablers for the players to play in that. Now, they can be in the form of incentives, but that's not the only thing. I think the enablers can be discussed at length. New techniques, new practices, and regenerative agriculture's acceptance in that sense and recognition are, I think, key enablers that we can put forward at this point in time for this discussion. Thank you very much. I hope I've been on time.
Just about. Thank you very much, Anne. So you took us from cocoa to wheat to dairy, and now we will also continue to focus on the food industry perspective with you, Caroline, on behalf of Mars.
Thanks a lot. And I don't know, there are a couple of slides, if it's possible to put them on, please.
I'm sure they will be coming. You can start in the meanwhile. Yeah, they're coming.
Many thanks. And you can already go to the next slide. So I'm Caroline Plou. I work in the public affairs team of Mars. And you might think yet another chocolate or confectionery company. But actually, what you might not know is at Mars, we're mainly a pet care company. So with brands like Pedigree, Royal Canin, Whiskas. So I'll try to bring more that lens to the conversation as well. The other thing that people tend not to know about our company is that we are a family-owned company still. So actually, when we think about sustainability as Mars, there is really in mind how will the next generation of the Mars family have the business? So how can, people and the planet still thrive so that in a generation, there is still a reality? And it's really with this in mind, if you go to the next slide, please, Luisela. It's really with this in mind that what we did in September was actually deciding to release in an open source a plan on how we will reach our commitment towards net zero by 2050. Because we believe that, more than commitments, what's important is to have exactly what Mrs. Tollery was mentioning, like the how. So we have been disclosing this very transparently, and I really encourage all of those of you who have not seen it yet to have a look at it. And we clearly articulate what are the activities we will take to reach 2050, but also to halve our carbon emission by 2030. And this plan that we have put together, so it's been inspired by science, but it's also been inspired by the journey we've been on since 2015. Because if you look across all Mars value chain since 2015, as a business, we've grown 60%, so quite significantly, but we've reduced our greenhouse gas emission by 8%. So we're really proud to have been able to decouple that economic growth and greenhouse gas emissions. It's not been easy. We're far from being where we want to be. We know we have to accelerate, and that's exactly why we decided to be transparent on how we'll reach this. What we decided as well was to commit a $1 billion investment over the coming 3 years against this new 2030 target. And we also tie now the part of the remuneration of the executive leaders of the company to the success of this plan. So that's really as well an internal transformation we're trying to achieve to bring net zero. But if you please go to the next slide, what I wanted to bring to you as well today, maybe some of you, when you enter the room, didn't even know that Royal Canin is a Mars brand. And the reality is that our consumers they face brands in supermarkets. And so it's very important, the story we convey as well through our brands and what our brands are concretely delivering. And so actually Royal Canin, so it's one of the biggest brand of Mars. For those of you who have cats and dogs, you might know this one. Royal Canin, quite a long time ago already, has been one of the leading brands in our portfolio who has taken the lead in saying, well, we want to be carbon neutral as a brand. And so to do that, they have already, worked very much on renewable electricity, on circularity, so things we have heard. And very similar than what Shan was saying for Mondelez, the reality of a business like Mars and of a brand like Royal Canin is that 80% of our greenhouse gas emission comes from agriculture and land use change, so combined. So working on the sustainability of the ingredients were super key. And so we have been working. So for instance, here I provide the example of soy, but I will provide you with another example. And something I wanted to stress on as well is that there are the actions that we're taking concretely, and there as well how you transform the business internally. And so typically, when I take the example of Royal Canin, the moment there was a commitment for the brand to become carbon neutral, there has also been an internal transformation into measuring the carbon footprint of the products and basing the decisions in the business based on what was seen. And I think this is also something very important. Knowing the numbers from the farmers, that's another difficulty, but also at our level as companies, knowing the carbon footprint of our products. If you please go to the next slide, I would like to show you one of the different examples actually that Royal Canin is running. So from farm to bowl, because it's for pets, a bit different from the fork, but very similar in the same time. So there has been really a willingness to work in our value chain, work with some of the farmers we deliver cereals from. And this is actually like one of the recent projects we started implementing here in Belgium and in France. So it's still a quite relatively small project, but we aim at growing it. And we're working with a partner called Soil Capital, who's actually an agronomy company, who brings the knowledge. So Mars comes in bringing the additional income to the farmers. But because we recognize we're not necessarily experts, we also work with Soil Capital, who brings really the knowledge on how to have precision farming, reduce crop tillage, for instance, or ensure that crops are covered. So these kind of activities that not only benefit from a carbon reduction and sequestration standpoint, but also benefit from a biodiversity standpoint, from a soil health standpoint, water. So things which are also equally important for us and which we know eventually will build like a virtuous circle. So if I can conclude with the final slide, with that specific example, you've heard me a lot speak about value chain. And it's actually something that, surprisingly, we see missing in the legislation at the moment. At European level. So for instance, if you take the carbon removal certification framework, we think it is a very credible and comprehensive tool when it comes to credits, but what when it comes to the value chain? And for us, there is like a big distinction to be made. It's not the same for us when we invest within our value chain with suppliers we know, with farmers we know, versus if we go and plant trees somewhere else at the other side of the planet where we don't have activity. And this distinction would be great to recognize also because we think that it will be necessary for the achievement of net zero in the agri-food value chain, that carbon farming reduction and removals remain in that value chain. And this will also allow basically to have a balance between all these considerations on climate, but also food productivity, because they need to go together. So this is definitely something we call out. As well as maybe more technical points. But if I take again the example I was just showing to you on Soil Capital that we plan to expand, the question from my colleague was, but concretely, what are the rules of the game for us to account it in our greenhouse gas emissions? And this is a big ambiguity, which currently is being addressed through the greenhouse gas protocol at global level, but obviously it's not regulatory, but which is something that we wish would be recognized as well in the EU legislation. And I think I will pause here for now, but I had a point on claims as well, which I think the legislation can help with. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for bringing clarity and also some food for thought in terms of the policy making side. I think I'd like in the conversation later to also dig deeper with you and chat on the regenerative agriculture part of the transformation. I also would like on behalf of the forum to welcome Mrs. Aguilar, who just joined us. Feel free to jump into the panel discussion now or later if you want.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I'm very late because it was admitted to our group and I had to stay here and hear you. So thank you so much to me.
Thank you very much. So now we'll move to Miriam. So from food processing to retailers. Miriam, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tiffany. And thank you also to the European Food Forum for inviting us and for giving us the opportunity to discuss this important topic. I think exchanges like this are extremely important if we want to tackle the complex issue of transitioning to sustainable food systems, and we have to do this together. So I think it's also fair to say that climate and sustainability are crucial topics in everyday retail activities and operations. And food retail has a special place in the food chain because we're in touch with manufacturers, to a lesser degree with farmers on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, we have daily contact with millions of customers and consumers. So hence, I think if we want to have a look at what retail companies are doing to become more sustainable, we have to really look at several facets. Yes, I just take you through a little bit the different areas where our members are active. And I think the main issue would be the products, of course. They are thinking about constantly about how to improve the offer made to consumers, be it seasonal products, be it regional products, organic, and cooperate with producers in order to make transport routes shorter and shorten the stocking periods, for instance. We are talking about plant-based products. We are looking at biodiversity and soils also. That's a little bit further away from the product as such. But we have to admit that issues are complex and we have to look out for trade-offs, unfortunately, because seasonal products may be the apple from your region, but if it's the avocado from Chile, it's no longer seasonal. It's seasonal, but no. Or animal welfare may not be emission-free. So there are some kind of trade-offs to be looked at. And I think we also have to admit that food and food production will never be climate neutral as such. But we can, of course, do everything we can to make it climate friendly. So this is the product side. Then if we look at packaging, of course, that's an important aspect. We're looking at recyclable materials for the packaging and to use recycled material or less material simply, or alternative materials. So that can be biodegradable or so. An example would be to put the grapes no longer in plastic boxes, but in a paper bag And of course, that's the visible side, but you also have all the processes behind a retail company. And I think that's always the problem we have as retailers, that people say, oh, I know retail, I go shopping every day, but they don't see what's backstage in a way. So the processes are a concern, of course, logistics and transport, energy consumption on the premises. So I'm talking about green electricity in point of sales or in stock centers. I'm talking about an environmentally friendly planning of new buildings. If retail companies build new hubs also, then they also think how to make them more CO2 friendly or neutral. And of course, transport plays a big role. Logistics, lorries should never drive empty. They can use alternative combustion materials and really use their volume capacity to a maximum. And at the end, we also need to look at waste and waste streams and waste prevention. And of course, an important part of the waste is also food waste minimization. And last but not least, of course, we have to look at consumers and how we can take them along. So consumer information is crucial. We believe, our members, I think, agree that empowering is always better than nudging or prohibiting or tell them you can't eat meat now, you have to go plant-based. But taking them along and showing them value instead of telling them what not to do as real incentives instead of giving them limitations. And of course, I mean, it's a very topical issue. We, of course, are not benefiting from any greenwashing. So we do welcome that the Commission has proposed something to have a level playing field and make green claims more substantiated. We have to look at the details, though, because ex-ante verification for about 40,000 products is quite a challenge. But we're not talking about this today. Just wanted to mention it briefly. So greenwashing is not the solution to win consumers' trusts. So that's important to mention. Maybe some examples quickly. What have retail companies done in particular to fill all these points I just made with some content? One of our major members tested sustainability labeling. I'm sure you're aware of this. EcoScore with mixed results. That would fill another probably another debate. Then one major discounter has recently lowered prices for plant-based products to align them with the prices for animal-based products, and other competitors have followed, just to make the plant-based alternative not so exotic anymore. And we'll see where that goes. But to reach more an affordability also of the more sustainable alternative, and to give consumers more choice. Some companies have quitted selling fruit that have been transported by plane, which is also cutting CO2 emissions in the end. I think many, if not all, food retailers have joined the Science-Based Targets initiative as well, and have committed to targets internally for Scope 1, 2, and also where more indirectly Scope 3. And they've also tried to look beyond what they're doing every day. So they've tried to explore how they can actively collaborate with suppliers, with own brand suppliers. And they're doing this together with NGOs, with WWF or other German-based NGOs. And the cooperation with suppliers is, of course, not telling them what to do, but supporting them in making the transition, and how giving them recommendations how they could themselves cut greenhouse gas emissions or setting own climate targets. And for that matter, of course, suppliers is one field of cooperation, but there's also a cooperation ongoing, or cooperation projects with farmers to support them in becoming more climate friendly. So there is a link between the producer and the consumer, because in the end, consumers with information on the websites and in stores are told, listen, if you buy this product, then you support directly the farmer who is trying to make an effort to become more sustainable. And a last example I want to mention is the foundation of a climate fund, for instance, where money has been raised to be invested over the next 5 years for broader projects such as re-wetting wetlands with a positive effect on climate and biodiversity. And again, linking this project to consumer information, I think is crucial to take the consumers along and explain them that they get value if they buy this product. So what do we need? John always mentioned we need enablers. I think I couldn't agree more. And companies need clear and plannable rules to work with. So changes don't happen overnight. So a common framework would have been helpful. It's also important to avoid legal fragmentation and having individual very nice solutions at national level, but nothing common. We need coherence. We have seen lots of different initiatives, be it taxonomy, deforestation, green claims. And there are some overlaps, and sometimes there's a bit of an unfortunate timing, because it seems that some specialized rules have been presented before the general frame. And I think it's another thing that is crucial, which is not on the regulatory side, is data. So we do need data to measure and compare products. And if data are available, then a reliable evaluation of a product can be made. And then you really can show the real sustainability impact. And of course, data must be available. They are costly. In France, there is a database, for instance. It would be nice if at European level we started collecting more data to be available in an open manner to all of them. And of course, I think in the end, enablers also include funding, kick-off funding, investments to facilitate the change, especially at the producer level, because they can't just switch from cultivating potatoes to strawberries the next day, I guess. So I think the issue of public-private partnerships makes a lot of sense here, which would always need to lead to market-driven solutions in the end. Yes, I think, and maybe to give you one little challenge as well, we want to, of course, go back to the Ipsos study. Consumers are price sensitive and there is a limited willingness to pay. And so that's the thing we have to solve still, and retailers do notice this. Of course, if we have inflation, then retailers, consumers will be less ready to spend money and go for the cheapest, even though in surveys they would say, of course, I want to know the cow, the milk I'm drinking off. But yes, to conclude on a more positive note, I think the most important is that we keep on dialoguing, that we keep on cooperating along the chain, and that we maybe choose new ways and cross-sectoral ways of talking to each other and cooperating, that we change also the mindsets, that we maybe focus more on creating business opportunities and markets instead of spreading out subsidies. And that we consider and admit that things take time, and that we recognize the diversity of agri-food chain actors and realities. So with that, I hand back to you, Tiffany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And you're making a perfect segue to the last panelist for this round, namely Louisa, on behalf of Euroconsumers. We talked a lot about consumers' perceptions, consumers' behavior, and now we'll have also a very insightful input from Louisa, who will be joining us online. Louisa, the floor is yours. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you to European Food Forum and you all, and especially also Mrs. Spinelli for chairing this interesting debate. I have a huge responsibility. Actually, I feel on my shoulder the responsibility to really be the voice of consumer and citizen. But this is exactly the point. Our mission is, as Euroconsumer, which is a network for the ones who don't know it, that include 5 consumer organizations present in Italy, Spain, Belgium, Testascià, OCU in Spain, Altro Consumo in Italy, DECO Proteste in Portugal, and Proteste Brazil, representing as such 1.5 million households, individuals. We are also members of BIUC, which is the umbrella organization very active in Brussels. But the point is that although we try to empower consumers and be the voice of consumer and improve the market, we cannot bear the burden of, let's say, the unhealthy choice or not perfect food choices of consumers, because of course we need to redistribute not only the cost but also the responsibility, as has been told so far, of these choices all along the supply chain. There is really a collective effort that we need to implement to reach this common goal, which is someone say quite a challenging one. And of course, as has been said, there is this new awareness and willingness to change. According to our survey, 30% and more of consumers are very much concerned, of course, of sustainability. They want to change, they declare that they want to change, they are scared of climate change more and more. But, well, it's not just a question of information. It's not just a question of labeling, but a lot of studies show us this is a question of food environment. So it's really the way the food offers are displayed not only in physical shop, but also online, thanks to the app of, let's say, the digital way we can order food, especially in the urban area. We are not offered with the most sustainable choices. So even when maybe the food choices is available, accessible, the point is not by default that this choice is the most healthy or the most sustainable looking at the environment, but also at our diets. So the point is that we need also to realize that this affordability and accessibility must be implemented in practice to make this change together. So if we are on the shelf of the supermarket offer with, let's say, at the eye level, these are marketing strategies, of course, with products that are rich in animal source food or products which are really not sustainable and less plant-based food offer. Of course, the consumer intention to change will be much more difficult. But last but not least, as has been mentioned, while we are debating, due to the crisis and due to the wars as well, the price increased a lot. And of course, the inflation is hurting especially vulnerable consumers and less affluent families, if you want. And so if we need to send a message to the European Commission, to the governments, but also to all the supply chain responsible for really make this change happen, we need a strong price signal. So we need to also change probably the level of taxation. We need to, I would say, play with incentive, really rewarding the producers that are investing in the right direction. And of course, we as consumer organization engage in and in touch daily with thousands of people will offer them through our product selector the best choice. We will engage in organizing also collective purchases online, like we do, for example, for solar panel already. We need to do so also with food. Why not? But of course, there should be, as said, transparency, accountability all along the value chain to have this chain really tracked. And of course, last but not least, as has been mentioned by Miriam as well, well, we cannot really, tell consumer to look at the greenest choice then if there is a lot of confusion on offset scheme about CO2 emission, they are not reliable. So we also need a second message that I want to then send to the institution, a really strong market surveillance and of course, sense of responsibility also producer and or retailers to ban the not unsubstantiated claim. So we cannot see, as it was discovered also in Belgium by Testachat, drinks package with claims on it saying, okay, carbon neutral, because they were simply also drink in plastic bottles. So there are really plenty of examples that show us that, okay, the consumer ready, but really need to have a kind of simple and easy way to make this sustainable choice the really simplest one. And we are there to play the ball, but of course it's really a collective effort. And as has been, I'm very glad to have seen even Mars, but even Miriam Schneider to really rely on data. It's no more the time to really hide behind the curtain, but really to put your face on it to really win the battle. I think I've stick to my 7 minutes.
Yes, you were perfectly on time, Luisa. So I appreciate that, and also with a very clear message, and also a challenge for the whole value chain to respond to. Are there any questions in the room or online? I don't see that it seems to be the case, so maybe I'll go first and continue with you, Luisa. You mentioned it came earlier in the conversation, but you also pointed about it. I mean, we see a current rise in food prices in Europe. In other parts of the world, we see increasing hunger. So how can we balance the push for sustainability in food production whilst guaranteeing the affordability and accessibility to consumers, as you mentioned before? This is the 1 million euro question, I know, but I think it's in many minds.
Thank you. I've already partially answered, but of course, people are already reacting to this. We monitor, for example, in Italy, the price increase of pasta since 2021, there was an increase of 32%. This is the food basket, the daily food basket. Tomato soup, 22%. And what do people do? Of course, sometimes they do buy cheaper, not very good quality product. They do not necessarily buy fresh food, despite the fact that we encourage them to do so. So the point is that this, as all crisis, is a huge opportunity also to revise our diets. Okay, often animal source products are costly, more costly, so they do not buy anymore maybe animal source product, but not necessarily fresh ones, because they may be select long-term products. This is not what we want to happen. So this is a huge opportunity to really make the bridge with this willingness to change that, however, needs to be supported with price incentive, as said. The price signal must be much more direct, and also in terms of offer. We discovered, for example, in a study published by Bilk, that the commercial offer in the supermarket often are about not necessarily plant food product, but often, most of the time, very fat and in sugar and other kind of food. So this is an opportunity to really make this sustainable option the default one for all.
Thank you for that, Luisa.
Cheapest, if possible. Okay.
I think we got your point here. I'm conscious of time, and also we need to respect the timetable of Mr. Butcher. So I would like maybe to throw one question for the different panelists here, also because it came both in your presentation, Caroline, and also Chan. Regenerative agriculture. You mentioned that you're working through different partnerships on different value chains with farmers. How do you understand regenerative agriculture? What's your definition, or what are the metrics you work around it? Because we talked about also substantiating claims. I think we also, the same could be applied to substantiating new approaches. I think it's another $1 million question, the definition of regenerative agriculture. Actually, internally as Mars, we speak about climate smart agriculture. So we have like a slightly different terminology, also because we had to it like a social component to this, which we think is important when we speak about farmers. So I don't have a specific definition to provide to you. It's more a list of activities, and I think this list will keep evolving. That's also the risk. If we have, a closed definition, there will be technologies that will help this progress, but it's really any activities that eventually have a benefit, not only from a climate standpoint, as we said, but also, on water, soil health, biodiversity. And so the KPIs is also a very difficult thing. What do we measure exactly? And if we start even just with carbon, measuring carbon sequestration, for instance, is tricky. And that's where we think, for instance, that there can be, we were just discussing this actually, I know I don't see, I see Sophia, we're just discussing this prior to that conversation. How do we even measure this? Do we ask for farmers to take samples, on a regular basis in their farms? I don't think anyone will jump for this. I mean, it's not what we want for them to do. So there will probably be a need for pragmatism. We might have imperfect data.
But also there is, for instance, I think a need, we believe as Mars, of especially in Europe, because we've got like all these great satellite programs, how to use remote sensor, from a satellite perspective to complement maybe some samples that can be taken on the ground to help with that specific kind of data. And I'm only speaking about carbon. I won't go in biodiversity. I know the consensus is not there in terms of how it's defined, but it's to, maybe I'm not answering your question, but it's just to show the complexity. But there are some solutions that can be thrown in there. I don't know, Shani, if you want.
No, I mean, well said, Caroline. I think highly complex issue, right? And I think, of course, how we define as companies regenerative agriculture matters for us as we are working today on this. But what really matters is to be able to come to a common definition, right? And I think there our regulators should be able to help us in that common definition by also identifying the benefits associated to it, right? Again, carbon sequestration. How do we capture that? How do we measure that? Is it really worth the efforts that we're discussing about? These are all valid questions, but I think they would need scientific answers rather than us defining the way we are treating them. There's one thing which is clear. I think soil health is deteriorating over the years, right? So that's proven by data in that sense. So how do we therefore contribute to that? Regenerative agriculture is seen as one of the solutions. It's probably not the only solution, but it's one of the solutions. So how do we therefore build on that? By joining hands together and having these common definitions, common KPIs associated with it, which would be measurable in the end and scientific. So I think this is an area that we can collectively work upon.
That's a good call to action for the Food Forum members to continue to dig into. A question to you, Nicola, because we're talking about climate neutral products. So one way to measure it is also the carbon footprint. Have you looked into the carbon footprint of the recycled fertilizers you talked about?
So yes, of course. So we do measure the carbon footprint of all our products with third parties, with international standards, obviously. And actually, on the example I presented earlier, it's hard to compare apple to apple because those are innovative products, so they are slightly different. But if we compare to the European benchmark, which is already the lowest one in the world, this product is about 90% carbon. We achieve 90% carbon reduction compared to a similar product. So that's a significant carbon reduction. But that, I would say, just the beginning. We have to reduce the footprint of our product, but we also have to, improve the efficiency, to improve to reduce the losses of the downstream chain for us, which is the farmer, and we are also working into that. But for that, we need the help of everybody. So I really appreciated the fact that our colleagues here explained that we need to work all together on that to improve, because we really need to work together. We cannot achieve that alone.
Thank you very much. And on that note, if you apologize me, Miriam, I would go to the last and one of the other key parts of the program with you, Mr. Butcher, to also share your perspectives on the topic after having listened to the different feedbacks and experiences and pilot initiatives of the different food chain players. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and honorable member of the European Parliament, dear panelists, dear colleagues. I would like to thank you for your kind invitation to the European Food Forum, and I would like to thank you for your very thoughtful contributions on the topic, the role of climate neutral products in sustainability for food systems. Some thoughts from my side, also taking into account the points you have made. I think everybody agrees to the need to have a more sustainable food system. What we need to be aware of is that climate neutrality is one part of a sustainable food system, an important part, but it's one part. I think everybody has agreed that sustainability of food systems is comprehensive. It's about ecological, environmental sustainability, but it's also about economic sustainability, safeguarding decent income for farmers, and it's about social sustainability in terms of maintaining landscapes, in terms of maintaining rural areas, in terms of having workers' rights respected. So it's an extremely comprehensive notion, sustainable food system, because it does not only cover the environmental aspects, but also the economic and social aspects. But even within environment, climate is one element, because sustainable food system in ecological terms is about climate, but it's also about biodiversity. It's also about soil, water, air. And I think while we are all agreeing on the need of having a sustainable food system, the problem starts when you have to make the trade-offs, because many of these objectives are, firstly, they're all interlinked, but partly there are conflicting objectives. Even within the environmental objectives, I could give you many examples where climate, biodiversity, and environment is not necessarily compatible, and animal welfare. You have extensive farming, very good for animal welfare and for biodiversity. But you might argue in terms of climate, it is better you have the animals in the stable and you capture everything. So I think this shows how complex the definition of a sustainable food system is. So if I just take then the climate part, because that's our main topic here today, I think we need firstly to be aware of the scale of the issues which we are talking about. The contribution of European agriculture to worldwide greenhouse gas emissions is about 1%. This 1% is mainly stemming from livestock and fertilizer, because they are the main sources of greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture. And I think through legislative measures and through the common agricultural policy, we are on track when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions reductions for 2030. I think this is due to the many measures which we also foresee in the national strategic plans. And recently there has been a reporting of the European Environmental Agency. Our reading of this report is that if the measures that member states offer in the national strategic plans are taken up by the farmers, we will meet the 2030 target for greenhouse gas emissions. But this is 2030 and further efforts are required. So the challenge is, how can we further reduce greenhouse gas emission in agriculture? And I take the remark of Mrs. Schneider, who has said climate neutrality and food production at one point in time, you need to produce, you will produce greenhouse gas emissions as long as you're producing food. The question is, how can we further reduce it? And since the main sources are fertilizer and livestock, everybody looks at these two sectors. I think Mr. Willem has just indicated how important the circularity is in with respect to fertilizer and greenhouse gas emissions in that respect. And I think also with respect to livestock, this question arises to have a better balance between animal proteins and plant proteins. But that brings me back to another question that many of you have raised. Consumer expectations, retailers, processor expectation about the definition of what is sustainability. The labeling issue. And I have here a study, I think it's 300 pages. I think we have 1,200 certification schemes in Europe, and everybody pretends that his certificate is a guarantee for sustainability. Now, I think you have also rightly pointed out that the European Commission has started to legislate in this area with the green claims issue. But if you ask my personal opinion, it's still hugely challenging to define what is a sustainable food system, because expectations and approaches are different, and still everybody argues in an evidence-based manner. That is even the more important thing. Look, here there are two certification schemes. I do not quote them. One has already been quoted today. In one system, the most intensive farming practices are the greenest, because they look at the production environmental footprint and the product is the greenest. While what I, and I think many citizens out there in the street expect, is red. So there is another certification scheme that does not only look at the production environmental footprint, but on the positive externalities of food production. If you have livestock, yes, it produces greenhouse gas emissions, and it might be a correlation between red meat and cancer. But there are also positive externalities from livestock. It's about grassland, which stores carbon. It's about biodiversity if it's done in an extensive manner. Who counts these effects in terms of sustainability? And so it's a fact of life. If you look at these certification schemes, you have certification schemes where the most intensive agricultural production is sustainable. And I do not want to show you the pictures, and I would not show it to a citizen because he would be horrified if I tell him this is the most sustainable production. And on the other hand, you have extensive farming, which is red. And then you have the other certification scheme where the extensive farming is green, which would meet my, and with me, I think many expectations outside there in the society, and the intensive are red. And I think that is really a very difficult issue. And I even cannot say who is right or wrong, because it depends what is your priority. Is it greenhouse gas emissions as the most important and single objective, or do we need also to look at other elements when we are qualifying sustainable food systems? And this is why I personally find it extremely, extremely difficult for all of us, for you in the chain, but also for the legislator, because at the end you have to, if you want legislation, you have to say either the intensive is green or the extensive is green. But you are not credible if you say both are green to a citizen. Then I think the point I would like to make, and I have really appreciated all your interventions from the different parts of the food chain. My honest assessment on this, I think there is no doubt that we need to think much more in value chains and in terms of the different actors of the food system. But I think it is important, and that is unfortunately a little bit my experience over the past years. We do not talk anymore about agriculture. We talk about food systems. But when the players of the food systems are around the table, the only thing that comes to their mind is what the farmer should do. But is this now your achievement, or is it the farmer's achievement if he does something? So if we want to have a discussion on the value chain, I think everybody needs to look at what he can genuinely do in his area of I wouldn't say influence, because also your interaction with farmers is very important. So don't misunderstand me. I really appreciate what many of both processors and retailers do in their direct contacts with farmers, because I think that is also something that we are underestimating, because we always think we are making policy, the public authorities, but you make policy, because you conclude contracts with farmers that forces them to become more sustainable and more sustainable every day. I'm sure you compensate them correctly for this. But who measures the progress that we are achieving thanks to all these actions from Arla, from Mondelez, from all the big players? Because you contribute to making farmers' production more sustainable. So I think I completely agree on the need of having to think much more in value chains, but please don't leave everything again on the farmer. When we have discussed the Sustainable Food System Framework Law, we received contributions. You know what I have received as first contribution? Article 1 of the Sustainable Food System Law should read, you have to reduce livestock in Europe by 60%. Is this what we want to discuss? So that brings me to the discussion you have raised, and I think this really merits a very honest discussion, the issue about the dietary change and the more plant-based diets, which is necessary for human health issues, but also for environmental, climate, ecological sustainability issues. But what is the reality? I have here the figures of our food production in animal terms, dairy, meat, pork. All the stuff we are producing, we are eating it today in Europe. We eat it. Partly we export of it, but we eat it. So I fully agree. We need a dietary change with respect to what we have just said for human health issues and for climate environmental issues. But we need to organize this behavioral change many of you have referred to. And if we do not succeed, and if people continue to remain in their patterns, we have a leakage problem in terms of getting food and meat from other parts of the world. So we need to change. And I think Frau Schneider has made reference to how should we change? Should we do it through regulation or through incentives? I have only personally two remarks in this respect. I wish personally two things when it comes to behavioral change and more planet-based food. Firstly, that we are really sure that what we are eating under such a revised plant-based diet really contributes to human health. And I would like to have the same number of studies that we have now for other meat-based products. I would like to have it for processed food and for all kinds of other food. So I really would like to be sure that the health issue is scientifically based, and evidently the same goes for the claims in terms of environment, climate, and ecological change. So these are my main remarks when it comes to these elements of how making the food system more sustainable. Many thanks.
Many thanks, Wolfgang. I think you also put us on a challenge to not just have the shared accountability, but also the individual accountability as each player on the food chain. One aspect, of course, that is in the mind of many here in this room and online is what about the Sustainable Food Systems Law? And I think you would be surprised if I wouldn't be asking the question if we would have clarity from the Commission on that initiative before the end of this mandate.
I think there are more trustworthy people to give you the reply on this question. We are not lead service with respect to this legislative initiative. But firstly, let me just repeat two things. Firstly, we have elements of what is a sustainable food system. I mean, quite frankly, if somebody buys today organic farming, he has, with respect to quite a number of elements, reasonable assurance. He should be sure that the animal has been well treated. He has assurance that the food this animal was eating is coming from his farm. He has assurance with respect to pesticide use, partly even fertilizer use. So this ticks many boxes in terms of a sustainable food. Now you can argue, yeah, but it does not address the climate issue, which we have just raised here today. But then you are immediately in the discussion about livestock and meat. The second thing I would like to say is we have also now this initiative on green claims, which at least gives you an indication of what should be entitled to be labeled sustainable. But let me be clear. If you look at this green claim legislation, we in our service had a certain hesitation because it promotes very strongly the EFF methodology to assess food. And for the reasons I've set out, I'm not entirely sure that the EFF method is the way how you should assess what is a sustainable food. And this is why I think the legal text foresees that also other methodologies can be used to assess what is green, which kind of food can claim green claims. And I think for the rest, and this is a question I have with respect to everybody, you see that these discussions on foods are hugely polarizing and divisive. And even if you advance in an evidence-based manner, you might have many solutions that are, as I've pointed out, with respect to using different certification methods for indicating what is a sustainable food system. So I think this still requires further work in a society where this issue is extremely polarized. And I come back on this question of what is sustainable food, because sustainable food, it should be sustainable, I come back, in environmental terms, in climate terms, in biodiversity terms, in animal welfare terms, in terms of income, economic sustainability. There are so many criteria that are relevant for sustainability, so that I'm afraid that if you look, and if a product should fulfill all these criteria, you will have very, very little products that meet all these targets. And then the question is, and I think that was a point that you have raised, and also the colleague from Norway, is it not more honest to look for a product that meets biodiversity, a product that meets animal welfare, a product that is, with respect to greenhouse gas emissions, compliant, than trying for the same product to define what cumulatively it has to comply with to merit the notion of sustainability, in fact. By the way, I'm not sure what a citizen is expecting if he's buying a sustainable product. Probably if you ask him to buy climate neutral, he knows what he understands. If it's about animal welfare, probably he also understands what it is. But if he buys something which certifies sustainability, what comes to his, what is his? Is it not something that we invent while people have other criteria to assess food, in fact? So this is what I have to say to this question on sustainable food systems, where I still feel that in many respects we have already paved the way that consumers should know what they should consume.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butcher, for this. We are behind schedule, so we have to close the meeting here. So I would like to thank all of you. Any chance for any MEP who wants to conclude, or we?
Unfortunately, no, because they are.
Okay. So then I will simply say that we have a lot of upcoming events with the European Food Forum, and I will just mention the next one, which will be a coffee conversation on food waste with Stephanie Beck from the Canada Deputy Minister for Agriculture and Food. I would like to thank you all for your participation online and in person, and also to all the distinguished speakers from the different steps of the value chain up to the policymakers for your commitment and your energy in the conversation. Stay tuned for more from the European Food Forum. Thank you.
Thank you.